We're going to talk a little bit more about the vintage mode, in other words, complying with the past, and virtual reality and interactive 3D, where the future is now. So what I want you to do is press fill and then go to vintage mode at the bottom where it says alternate colors and textures and hit done. And then refresh the screen, Alt Z, and you'll see the screen will look something like this. And as you zoom up on it, you'll see the different patterns. And the way that works is when you're in vintage mode and you go to fill, you'll see a new thing that says vintage. So let's say, for example, we wanted the garages to highlight. So I'll double click in the vintage box and I want that to be maybe this pattern here for whatever reason. And you could create your own tiled images, by the way, off the internet, and then I'll hit done. And I want that repeat pattern to be I'll try 8 feet, and I'll hit done. And then when I refresh the screen, you'll see that pattern in the garage. And that's how vintage mode works. So whatever fill you have and you want, what you'll do is while you're in vintage mode, again, you'll see this extra tab over here. And then you'll just change what you want. For example, my park area, if I wanted those a little bit looser, maybe I'll try 40, and now they're looser. So experiment with it, and I think you'll like it. And it all turns off when you go back to alternate colors and textures, and then you're back to your normal fills. So let's talk about virtual reality. First of all, a digital train model must exist. Now, it could be a fictitious one that's flat that you just make up, or it could be the proposed, or it could be the existing ground, but it must exist. Do not attempt this on an old and slow computer. It's not intended for 3D. Can you do it on a new computer without a fancy graphics board? Absolutely. Can you do it in VR without a fancy graphics board? Absolutely not. So it is very, very flexible. It is usable. If you use SketchUp and you're in 3D and it performs pretty decent, then this 3D is going to perform pretty decent on the screen also. Make sure there's no zero square footages as far as the surfaces go. Now, I would avoid excessive DTM points. DTMs, the digital train model, is a lot of data, and it tends to put the brakes on the 3D. I would never exceed 25,000 points unless you have the very latest, greatest Intel or AMD i9 12th gen processor. Then maybe you could go up to 50, 70,000 points. Less than 10,000 is good, less than 5,000 is ideal. But as you use this, you want to filter those DTM points down. When you pull up beginning step 13, you'll notice that the background is a little bit darker green. And if you go into fills, and then you'll look at the textures when you click on site, it's been clicked on grass mode, and that will give some height to areas of grass so that the green areas stand out. Typically, you would not want to do a 3D with all of the line work. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the layers. I'm going to turn all the layers off, inactive, set all. So they're all off, but what I want to do is take and activate layer 10, and the reason I'm doing that is so that the parking stalls will show up in the LandMentor file. Now, if we export to SketchUp, now those will disappear, but at least we'll have in the 3D environment way to put the cars in the stalls. So now we're ready to create a 3D. And all we're going to have to do is start a virtual reality. And then what it's going to do is take it from there to bring up a 3D window. So what it's doing, just so that you know, to get all the curves nice and smooth, remember we have quite a few points on the DTM. This is a proposed DTM, so we have quite a few more points on it. And so it's figuring out when it drapes the textures over the DTM, is that in fact a curved line? So it's really doing millions of calculations. Now I'm running this on a 12th gen i7 desktop. And what you're looking at is purely the computational speed of your computer. So if you have an older computer, this is going to take quite a bit longer. If you have a newer computer, say like this, a 12th gen desktop or laptop, it should be a similar speed to this. So it's all about the processing power. If you have hundreds or thousands of lots and units and a lot of detail over a digital train model that is, say, filtered down to maybe 80 to 100,000 points, this is going to take it a very long time. And so we recommend just putting it in the background until it's done. You can still be doing other work as this is processing, and it won't slow down. You could run as many LandMentor copies as you want. I've had up to about 10 all running at the same time. And so you can see it's a lot of processing, prepares the 3D, and then we're using Unity, and you'll see a Unity window pop up, and at that point you'll know that the 3D is done, and that within seconds you'll see the site in 3D. The 3D window will appear, and you'll see at the upper right part of the screen, it'll be a map showing you where you are on the ground. On the lower right will show the coordinates, elevation, and the speed that you are currently at. The look at, you're looking at north, and you're viewing horizontal. And it also shows the date and time, and all this will become fairly important. So if you hit the left button, arrow button on your keyboard, and you might have to click in the window to activate it. The left button on your keyboard will rotate to the left. You can see the buildings. Again, we painted those buildings so they're showing the retail. You can see how that works. Shows that we're now looking southwest at the bottom right of the screen, but you can see that also on the map on the window. And then you can see how the water reflects in the sky and things like that. So the right arrow button rotates to the right, back goes back, and the forward arrow button goes forward. So you could use Xbox 360 to replace all these movements, but these are the basic movements that you'll use on the keyboard. Now you could hit U for up, or the plus, and then D for down, or the minus for down, and they both work the same. Depends on the keyboard, because maybe you don't have a numeric pad, so that's why we have two separate ones. Now the upper right corner map, M turns it or off and on. So these are the basic controls that you have on the site. So when we look at it from above, and then you see the parking stalls, so that's that line work, and then I'm using the middle button of the mouse to scroll down or up. So look at the lower right part of your screen. You were looking down at 17.2 degrees, and then it shows the coordinates of where we're at. And then we can look down on the site. So the reason that we had the line work for layer 10 on is so those parking stalls could show up. Now, if you want to see the contours, you hit C for contours, and then the contours will show up. And they'll show up at what the current contour interval rate is. So you could see them there on the ground. If I hit G for ground, it's at ground level. And now you can see the contours. So I'm going backwards, I'm going forwards. I hit C to turn them off. So there's a lot of functionality you have. Again, I'm going to hit plus to go up. I'm going to take a look at that commercial building, and then I'm going to hit T for time. Look at the lower right part of your screen, and then it's taking and it's increasing the time. Now look at the shadows change. Those shadows, if you go into the VR setup and put the latitude and longitude of the site, or that area that you're working in, that shadow is going to be accurate. So at a city planning commission meeting, at a council meeting, you have a tall building, and the neighbors say, you're going to take light away from me. Put the neighbors' homes in there. Maybe do some simple massing, or maybe you try to replicate the home and drop it in SketchUp. But what will happen is that will answer that question live at the meeting. So T turns the time off. Shift T reverses it. So you could go back in time, but the time will be shown. N, that's noon. So those are the basic functions if you don't have an Xbox 360. Setting the speed, spacebar. Now look, every time I hit the spacebar, look at the speed. So I'm going faster now, shift spacebar, and then I'm reducing the speed. And you can reduce it to about 2.5 miles an hour. And why would you want to go slow? Well, if you're inside a home, you want to slow down. So for now, I'm just going to exit out of this window and I'm going to hit escape. And in the next part of the lesson, what we're going to do here is I'll click on the LandMentor window to activate it, and I'm going to zoom up on this area here where the apartment buildings are. And I'm just going to turn all the layers back on. So I'm going to go to layer, it's active, set all, and then we've got the buildings. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and then pan over, and I want to put a 3D building over these. And in your LandMentor first day of training, you go into groups, add group, you'll see houses for class, 3D models, and I want you to click 3D apartment. And what that is a group that has a 3D model tied to it from SketchUp. This originally came from SketchUp. Now, it could come from a variety of packages, but I could caution you that if someone is using, for example, the Autodesk and they read it in the SketchUp and then you export it to a Collado, will it work? It's likely to work, but the overhead that's typical of those files is like hitting the brakes on 3D, and that's why you don't see a lot of site plans done in 3D, because it's just so much overhead. It just takes forever. So what we're doing is we're placing the groups in the exact same way you would place a 2D group, but you can see it's shown by a black blob essentially. So you just kind of line it up. You know, if you're off a foot or two, you are never going to see that in 3D because you're looking at a neighborhood design. So you don't have to worry too much about getting it absolutely exact. You want to get it close, but you don't want to spend all day at it. You can see how fast this is. So now that I've added the two buildings, I'm going to go back into the 3D VR and start virtual reality again. Now it's not going to have to build all the previous overlay of the surfaces draped over the digital terrain model, but it's still going to have to calculate where the new buildings are than where the elevations of those buildings should be. And that's the real advantage of putting buildings in LandMentor instead of like SketchUp or another third party, because then you're going to have to get the angles of the buildings right. You're going to have to get the elevations, and what we just did in literally several seconds would take several minutes, and it's tedious. So now you'll see that the buildings are shown up there into your 3D, and you can move around with the arrow buttons, move up and down. G, again, gets you to ground level. Shift G, by the way, goes up 200 feet and then looks down at 45 degrees. So G is ground level, Shift G goes up, and then you could always hit T for time. And so you've got some taller buildings there, and you might want to see where the shadows are and hit T for time. And so let's say you want to maybe brighten it more or less. You would hit the page up and page down because maybe it's not bright enough or it's too dark. Page up and page down also changes the brightness. If I hit G to go to ground level, and then I'm going to hit spacebar a few times to get close to that building, and then I'm going to move into the unit with shift spacebar to go slower. So I'm now looking at the display. I'm now at 2.5 miles an hour, which allows us to go slower, and then we could go inside the unit, and then once I'm inside, I could go into the kitchen, for example, and then by the way, if I hit A, that's about face. R is to the right 90 degrees, L to the left 90 degrees. So R, and then you're in the kitchen, and this would be the view out the kitchen. This is a basic way you would use LandMentor without an Xbox 360 controller, and then now I'm actually pushing my Xbox 360 controller, and I'm going to hit the right trigger to go up, left trigger to go down, and then I'm moving a little. It's actually a little bit smoother with the Xbox 360 controller, and you can move about much easier. So these controllers can be found on eBay for $15 or $20. You want to get a USB Xbox 360 controller. I do have remote ones that are Bluetooth. There's a little bit of a communication lag between the Bluetooth. I find it's better to get a wired Xbox 360 controller, in my opinion. So on this next step, I'm just going to go back into groups, add a group, houses for class, 3D models, and we'll do 3D Parker left. That's the garages on the left side, and place those. Escape. And then the next one, which is Parker right, and place those. Escape. And then we'll take a look at how they look. Start virtual reality again. So we're back at the scene now that we've added the homes of where we ended off. I am using my Xbox 360 controller. I'll hit T for time, and now we've got the homes placed onto the street. And these homes, you'll notice I didn't have them absolutely exactly where they should be, but you really can't tell the difference in 3D. And then this also gives you a verification in some of your grading. We could see we've got a problem there. We have a problem here with the driveway, so you might want to pay attention to a little bit more of the proposed contours. And this gives you a verification on your work before you actually go further, unless this is just a concept plan. And if it's a concept plan at concept stage, when you're looking at the site, no one's going to notice some of these inconsistencies. You're in a planning commission meeting or you're showing this to your client, and they're really not going to notice that. And then when you go into the units, and you'll see a little bit of difference here, is again, I'm using an Xbox 360. When I go into this unit, I have a little bit more control of speed. And then you'll notice I have the wood floor. I've textured the walls so they're a little bit easier to see, and I put a different color on the ceiling. That's actually a hint they give you in SketchUp. The apartments have the same color, and the walls aren't textured, so they kind of wash out a little bit. But then you could say, hey, look, here's your view from the living space windows. And of course, if you put on a VR headset, you're no longer looking at the screen. You're actually inside that living room, and then you're looking out to the outside. As we take and we've got our buildings in, we've done that fairly easily, very fast. Now it's time to add the cars, people, and trees. Now, the thing about cars and people, you want enough cars and people to essentially be in every scene. Because if you put trees in homes, well, a tree in a home can be any size, but people and cars give you a scale reference. Let's add some trees and people and cars. Now we're going to go back into add group, and then when we go into the 3D models, you'll see cars, people, and trees. So we're going to bring up this guy with the cool jeans. And what I'm doing, if I'm holding shift down and then the left button, and what that will do is randomly rotate the person, and then that will mean that when we create these people on the ground, they're not all going to be facing the same direction. So it's a little trick you could do. Shift and the left button will randomly rotate the 3D model. And I'm placing some people on the walks. They're a little bit hard to see because, again, they're people and they're small. So then what I'm going to do is bring up the BMW. Now you'll see the way we create the 3D models, there's a little bit of a triangle, or it'll be a line in front. They're a little bit hard to see, but generally these models come with the front end facing south to give you a reference. So we are pretty consistent that way. And I think I'm going to do the Ford Ranger. I'm going to put a few of these in. That's a fairly big vehicle. and that will show the uh, scale of the site. So I'll put a few of those trucks in. I'll spatter them about. So you want, different kinds of vehicles. I'm going to go ahead and put some in the parking stalls, and I'm going to randomly do that. And so we can see where the parking stalls are and put a couple of the trucks in there. You can see it's fairly fast. If you were to do this in Enscape or SketchUp, it would take you quite a bit longer. So that's one of the advantages of using LandMentor, because really designed it for site plan creation and not architecture or HVAC or some other thing. So I've got some birch trees. That's the foliage of the tree, and you can kind of see where that is. I would caution against putting too many trees on the site, because then you can't really see the 3D. Too much landscaping will overpower. I'll put a cherry tree on there, and then add some. You want a variety of trees and spatter them throughout the site. You're going to have to experiment with this to really get a feel of where to put these trees, because you really don't want to block a view. You don't want to block a view out the window, that sort of thing. And now we'll take a look at it and see what this looks like in the 3D. So we call up 3D again, and then we process this area. Now we've got the 3D window up. You could see the difference now. I'm going to just click in the screen to activate my Xbox 360 controller. You could see the shadows. I'll hit T for time, and then I will experiment with where I want the shadows. And you can see the shadows on the leaves. And as I move, it's rendering in real time, and you could see that each one of these items really affects the 3D speed. So I'm going to go G for ground level, but with the cars and the people, now you could start seeing scale. You could start sensing a bit the scale of how far things are. So again, you want cars, people, the far homes there. I'd probably want a couple cars in those driveways. So it gives me a scale reference. And then, we could see, well, maybe we don't have enough trees on here. So you'd want to landscape it up with trees and bushes. And again, we give you 3D models, and this is really how you would be using LandMentor 3D. It's free, it's accessible, it's quick. But if you really want to take and get something really more photorealistic, we admit that, okay, we've taken it this far, let's take it the next step. We would encourage you to use Enscape through SketchUp. And the way to do that is I'm going to hit Escape to go back to the window. Let's say that we've got everything that we wanted here. There's a little trick here. I'm going to use Enscape trees, for example. I want to take out these trees. So I could see where it says blend on the groups. I'm going to hit the middle button of the mouse. And what that does is it tells you what the graphic and the 3D models are. So for example, I want to take out this birch tree and the cherry tree, but keep everything else. And I'll say remove groups and then refresh the screen. And what happens is I've taken out the trees, and I'm going to use Enscape trees. So that's a little hint. Under blend, under groups, you can hit the middle button and decide to remove whatever groups you want. And that's an easy way to do it. So then I'm going to go back into VR 3D. By the way, you want to save your file away as you do these. Save them away, maybe in different file names, different updates. And then under VR 3D, I'm going to hit Export 3D as a collada and just hit Submit. Once you get to the 3D to the point where you like it, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup. You hit Escape to get out of that window. We'll go back into the LandMentor window. We're going to activate all of the layers, and then we're going to go into the fills, and we're going to go down to where it says hide all groups. We're going to show all groups, and then we're going to set all the fills and hit done and refresh the screen, and it looks like your normal working environment. So this next step, we're going to show you how to export to SketchUp. So we go to VR 3D, and then we're going to export it to a collada file. And then once it's done, you hit OK, you'll pull up your SketchUp. It is a good idea to update your file, by the way. after you're done with all of these different things. So you do want to update it. So we pull up SketchUp, doesn't matter from 2017 or the latest 2022, and we're going to import a collada file. Now, each one of these steps takes a few minutes. You'll see a .dae file in the directory, import that, and then you'll see the site plan come up onto the display. That takes a few minutes. I would move the site into close to your axis, and then there's a few more steps that we go through. It'll be a little bit slow moving around, so you want to go up to View, and then go Edge Style and turn off your edges and your profiles. And then you can move much faster. Now there's a few other things we're going to do here. We have Enscape onto SketchUp, move around, take a look at it. We're going to already installed Enscape on this, so we're going to go to Enscape and we're going to call it up. Now, again, that will take a few minutes. For time, we shortcut, and you can see a very different quality on Enscape. We're using the Xbox 360 to move around, and you see how bland the water and the grass is? Well, we could go back into SketchUp, and we're going to redefine that by taking our paint can and hitting the Alt button down while the paint can to grab the water, and we're going to rename it water. And the name of the water, we're going to go into the grass area, the green, and we're going to rename it grass. And those are two keywords in Enscape. And then what we're going to do is get back into the Enscape window and take a look at it. But first, we're going to go into the asset library. What the asset library is people trees. I've got some favorites. I'm moving some Enscape trees around. They're actually not as big as they look for the symbols, and I'm just placing some trees. And those are trees that'll sway in the wind as you move, and move them around. You get a feel of these assets. A nice thing about the assets versus going into SketchUp or LandMentor is they don't seem to slow down the VR or the 3D at all. They're fairly high quality, and that's why if you're going to do some high level stuff, I would recommend using the SketchUp and Enscape for your final 3Ds. They do seem to have the market. And then when we go back into the Enscape window, which you'll see it's quite a bit different quality. Enscape and LandMentor were very, very similar in the Xbox 360 controls. You can record video. You can see the exact same data that we've created in LandMentor and the difference in the quality. Now, you could do interior lighting, you could do a lot of other things in Enscape that we take advantage of. I wouldn't put glass on the models. You could do it purely in SketchUp and place them. Now, one of the last things we're going to do here is we're going to export and go to DWG and export this as AutoCAD. Now you'll notice I'm just took this as is. There's a caution on this. I said beginning 13 CAD. I'm going to always choose a lower version of AutoCAD. I'm not going to export the contour data with it. And then I'm going to call up that file that we just saved in AutoCAD. Now, one of the things is that we had the 3D models on the site. They will export. So I would caution not to export with 3D models. Those are those yellow areas there. And I would either delete all groups before you did this, or just call up the original file before you added the 3D data. Now, so we've exported AutoCAD, we started with the surveying, we built the site, and what we're going to do is save this as a .txt file. And when we save it as a .txt file, that will be a format that could go back into the surveyor's data collector. So we're going to just rename the file a little bit, and then I'm going to use the defaults to export. And one other step will come up, and that is, what are we sending to the data collector? Now notice the building layer is automatically defined the building points. And let's say I want to go to private drives and streets. I'll put the street in there and the sidewalk. So we're going to stake out those items to the field. I'm going to save them. And do I want to protect points? Sure, why not? And that will protect those survey points. So again, we started with surveying. We built the site from surveying, and then we've isolated the points we want to stake out. So we end with surveying. So this is the full circle use of LandMentor.